Hey there, Chris Crowell, editor-in-chief of Solar Builder magazine here. And today on The Pitch, we're talking about the online solar marketplace with Lockie Fleet, CEO of SolarReviews. Hey, Lockie, thanks for taking the time.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
For the uninitiated, SolarReviews is I think, a great online marketplace for home solar. You have about 800 solar installs in your database across the country and have generated nearly 700,000 solar leads and appointments in 2023 so far at the moment we're speaking. So, pretty popular place. And I do say if a friend or relative of mine is interested in solar, I do recommend SolarReviews because I do feel like your approach encourages quality installs and consumer education and not solely price competition, which I feel is important. So I guess my first question is, do you at SolarReviews feel that responsibility for guiding customers to informed quality purchases?
On some level, yes, mate. We're a third-party service. We publish content to help people make informed decisions. We also obviously help those consumers get in contact with local contractors, and it sort of ends there. There's some platforms out there that sometimes dictate the forms of communication that the contractors can use in terms of contacting and trying to sell a solar system to a consumer. That's not really anything we do. We put them in contact with each other. That gives each installer the opportunity to present their products and their value proposition to the consumer. And I think that's really, really important in our industry, not just to look at the cheapest is always the best.
You also have a pretty rigorous scoring system for solar installers.
If they came through an online service to find contractors, it probably goes without saying they're going to revert back to the internet to do their research on those contractors once they've got the bids in front of them. So it's really, the online reputation is really important in the scheme of things too, and that's what we try and do. We're trying to help consumers make an educated decision on who they should have install their solar system.
What would you say are often the common points of contention for homeowners that lead to lower scores and lower ratings for installers?
Pretty much what you would expect. Anyone who has a bad experience is much more likely to leave a bad review than someone that's had a good experience. So, the main ones are obviously poor customer service. Unfortunately, not every install always goes off without a hitch. There's bound to be some issues. And I think consumers do understand this. I think what it comes back to is, how was that problem handled? Consumers often care more about how the problem was handled rather than the problem itself.
Is there anything you do try to do to encourage more positive or just like more reviews in general, not just like 1-star bad customer service?
Yeah, no, we help people when they sign up for our platform. We help them. There's a tool in there that they can send emails out to their past clients and say, hey, I'm new on SolarReviews. Can you leave review for me? The companies in our database that often have good reviews and good scores are the ones that actually really care and take and look after their customers. And I think a lot of that comes down to communication as well. Again, there's a lot that goes into the install and the selling of a solar system, and there's often a lot of things that are outside of the contractor's control. Permitting times, product issues, they can't get the panels in and that sort of stuff. So just being open and honest and having an open line of communication, I think, is really important.
Customer service for sure, but that can be kind of a broad bucket, and one person's view of how they were being treated is maybe different from someone else's expectations, right?
I think the best practice is just, have check-in points. No one likes to, people that are spending money on a solar system are spending a large amount of money. It's not everyone has that money readily available to them. So feeling like they've paid some money over to a contractor and then just not, whilst the process is going on in the background, if they don't hear from the contractor for a month because they're waiting on a permit, it can sometimes send shivers down their spine. So just a simple check-in to say, hey, this is where we're up to, consistently along the process, I think is really good. So a lot of our customers that have really good reputations, they have very, very good after install service as well.
Do you notice that customers come back onto the platform maybe months later or something with a to update their review? Because this is like an ongoing relationship in a way between you and your solar contractor, right? So maybe the initial like, hey, everything went great, my system's up and running, but it's like a year later, there's an issue, and now
Yeah,
you have. Does that happen? Like
yeah,
updated? Yeah.
absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. When a contractor or an installer sells a solar system or a consumer buys a solar system, they're both entering into a 25-year relationship. And so I think that ties back into that conversation before about, not just being in a race to the bottom and maintaining some margin in your jobs and allow for future issues. A lot of solar experts estimate that, up to 50% of the solar installs done to date that have been orphaned, which means that obviously the company that installed them is no longer around to service them. And I think that's really important from a consumer point of view to understand that. Not to mention, obviously, the fact that a lot of people don't live in their homes for 25 years, so they're likely to become repeat customers if you look after them.
Why are customers maybe choosing one installer over a next if it's not price?
The companies that take an educational approach, it's very, very, and this should be the case. It's very, very hard to sell something to someone if they don't understand what you're selling. So the companies that take an educational approach and help the customer understand, what solar is, how a solar system is actually going to help you, and most people are looking into solar to try and save a bit of money. So the companies that help them understand that, for example, a lot of people don't even really understand how they're currently billed by their utility, let alone how they will be billed once they install a solar system. And so, covering off on key facts like that and getting people to really understand it helps you build value. So, it's not just a race to the bottom. And there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it too. A more educated salesperson, is gonna be able to look at a main board and say, okay, well, this needs to be upgraded. As opposed to when they get out there to do the site survey, they have to tack it onto the price, and the customer feels like they've been a little bit wrong because they didn't have all the information up front.
Yeah.
And to be honest, a lot of that comes from product training as well. Companies that panel inverter, any manufacturer that invests in training resources for the reps is probably going to do very well because the reps are more informed.
You recently published a report on the top 10 states for going solar, which had some pretty interesting takeaways. I was curious from your end, what stood out to you in terms of what's really driving value?
Surprisingly, it's not just all about electricity prices. It goes without saying that the higher electricity prices are, the more beneficial a solar system can be. But there's other factors at play, like the state rebates. Obviously, you've got the federal tax credit and stuff like that as well. So we just tried to take a different approach and a different look at it to provide a little bit more information at a residential level rather than a solar as a whole level.
That makes me curious on your outlook for home solar in general, with changes in net metering policy in states like California and rumblings of more changes like that happening across the country. Noting that economics is often a big factor. The economics are changing. So I'm curious how you feel about the residential solar outlook.
From 2010 to 2020, the cost of residential solar dropped by about 65%. And in the last 10 years, across the nation, this obviously varies depending on state, but across the nation, the cost of electricity has risen by 24 or 25%. So if those trends keep going the way that they're going, the economics are going to bounce back. Whilst some of these utilities are in control of how they bill their customers that have solar panels on their roof, etc., they're also in control of their own prices, and they're probably not going to stop pushing up their electricity prices, which then brings that economic conversation back into play.
So I guess continuing on this line of thinking, drilling down specifically into that long tail solar installer. So in your 2022 solar installer survey, 62% of respondents believe the IRA would lead to business expansion. And so that's a pretty solid majority for that highly touted bill that we talk about a lot. But in my mind, it should be higher for such an important bill, right? So that means 32% believe their business will stay the same. And those who plan to utilize the IRA, it seems like the majority of the segment is for commercial solar, which I've been kind of pointing out here and there since it's been passed, that it's nice, but it kind of favored larger scale solar projects, not really homes solar mom and pop shops and their customers. So after saying all that, I guess my question is, why am I right or why am I wrong with how I phrase that?
No, I think you've got some good points. I mean, you're right. There's additional tax credits available to commercial solar, or commercially owned solar. So, maybe maybe the 32% that thought things would stay the same. Maybe they were factoring in the interest rate rises. The tax credit helps, but it's sort of offset by the interest rate rises because it plays into, again, to the economics and the financial returns on people installing solar. Some of these bigger national size solar companies that are offering lease or PPA options, they obviously retain ownership and therefore can claim that tax credit, and the extra tax credit, especially if they're offering it in a low income area. But like I said before, I mean this bill is, at the moment, they say it's going to last until 2020 or 2032. Sorry, so there's still a long time left for interest rates to drop. If the actual price of solar, like I said, it's dropped by 65%. If we keep seeing that trend, it's going to lower the actual cost of the solar system. The other trend that I mentioned was electricity prices going up, so that obviously affects the economics. So there's still time, I think, over the course of the next 9 years, for it for these guys or these solar companies to really see an increase in business. They just need to obviously weather the storm right now.
And I can see, just as solar just keeps gaining more mainstream popularity, when people are Googling it, they hit SolarReviews, they type in their house, and then they're connected with more local solar installers, and not necessarily large nationals and stuff. So there's definitely a lot of market that hasn't been explored yet.
You asked me earlier what leads to I guess higher scores on a review platform like ours, and one of the things I probably should have mentioned is that the smaller solar companies, or the more local solar companies, tend to be more vertically integrated. What I mean by that is that everything throughout the solar sales and installation process happens by all under their banner. So there are no sales organizations, there's no subcontractors installing the system, etc. That stuff inherently leads to a better system install, and therefore less issues, therefore less bad reviews, effectively.
And then also helping those installers that we talked about that are maybe local and doing everything under one roof, like not have to be literally experts in also managing their online reputation. Like you kind of handle a little bit of that by being
and I think as well, though, like that's the other thing that we're trying to do. We're diversifying. We've got more products on the market now. We're selling set appointments, because those mum and pop shops, like they're out on they're out working all day. It's much easier for them to have a preset appointment than it is to have to try and get a lead on the phone. We're an avenue for them we're an avenue for these smaller companies to market through and effectively share some of the cost. You can share the cost whilst you're sharing it with three competitors. It helps you get business in the door without those huge upfront marketing costs.
Awesome. Well, this was a great conversation. And Lockie, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
No worries, mate. Thank you very much for having me.